Running Scared by Lynn Cook, Chapter 7. Christmas Day was always fun at Lucy and Jason's. In fact, you weren't allowed to not have fun. After the traditional exchanging of gifts when you arrived, you would be handing a glass of whatever, and that would continuously be topped up throughout the day. Lucy was an excellent cook, always trying new things and different concoctions that never failed to taste delicious, and there was always mountains of food. Lee would be allowed to help with the finer touches, but the main part Lucy would insist on doing herself, putting as much effort into the presentation of things as she did with everything else. She knew everybody's likes and dislikes, and catered for them accordingly. Both of Lucy's parents were there, whom Lee adored, and they in turn treated her as though she were another daughter. Also there, Lucy's brother and his wife, who again were always good company. Then Jason's brother Billy, who was always pleasant enough, and his sister Patricia, who nobody, with the exception of Jason and Billy, could abide. Like Lee, Jason had lost both of his parents at a fairly young age, so because of this, or how Lee often felt, in spite of it, he had become very close to his siblings, but their personalities could not have been more different. They were halfway through dinner before Patricia started her bitchiness, and as usual, she always singled Lee out. "Still haven't got yourself a man then, Lee?" "No, Patricia, I'm still very much on the proverbial shelf. How about you?" Lee smiled, as always, being polite for the sake of the day and Jason's feelings. "Well, I have several, shall we say, acquaintances, but I think I'm just having too much fun to even consider settling down just yet. That's the problem, you see, in my case. I just have too much choice." Patricia was attractive in a very snooty kind of way, but was so slim she was almost verging on anorexic, which wasn't surprising as she ate next to nothing, but would just push a few vegetables around her plate and pretend to be full. She had long, straight, dark hair, which matched her long, straight nose and high cheekbones. She also wore far too much makeup, though always claiming to wear hardly any. The only good thing to say about Patricia, in a very twisted kind of way, was that she drank too much and had never learnt to hold it. As such, her company only had to be endured for short spaces of time, because she never lasted long, needing to sleep off the alcohol's effect. Lucy and Lee usually spiked her drinks quite heavily to help things along. "I'm sure Lee has her fair share of admirers, Patricia. Being as beautiful as she is, how could she not? They must quite literally be queuing up around the corner, I would imagine." This came from Billy, Jason's brother, who, as usual, was laying on the charm with a trowel. Lee smiled her thanks at him. "I'm sure you have, Lee," Patricia acknowledged, "but it must be very difficult for you, darling, to know whether their affections are genuine or not." "What makes you say that, Patricia?" Lee was trying very hard to make her smile seem sincere. "Well, surely it must have occurred to you that in a lot of cases they probably don't care about you at all. They're simply just after your money." "What a bitch." "I don't really find it a problem, Patricia, because anyone with half a brain can tell if someone's genuine or not. And in the same sense, I'm sure there are people out there who are attracted to insincerity, stupidity, and half a brain. How many admirers did you say you had?" There were giggles around the table. "Several," Patricia replied flatly, having fully understood Lee's meaning. She was quiet for a few moments before she continued. "How much are you worth, anyway?" Jason interrupted before Lee could answer. "Patricia, I don't really think that's any of your business, do you?" "I'm simply asking a question. I didn't realize that Lee's wealth was such a deep, dark secret. After all, we're all friends here." She smiled insincerely. "Indeed we are, Patricia," Lee smiled back, "which is why I'm never offended when you ask me that question every time you see me. And I think it's adorable that you always feel like you're going to get a different answer. As I have told you on many occasions, I don't really count my worth in monetary terms, but I've always tended to believe that a person's character is what makes them of any real value. So in that respect, I quite like to think of myself as priceless." "And so you are, my dear," said Lucy's mother, who disliked Patricia as much as Lee did, and loving and caring, she glared at Patricia, and far more willing to suffer fools than I could ever be. Patricia remained silent for the rest of the meal. By the time they had moved through to the living room, she was ready for round 2. Are you still doing your little job, Lee? That little job, as you put it, Patricia, is taking Lee to New York for a month in January and happens to be one of the biggest PR companies in London. Only Patricia could make Lucy defend the fact of Lee working for a living. Lee couldn't help but smile. Really? Patricia feigned surprise. They must be quite pleased with whatever it is you do for them. Though really, darling, I have to say, I don't understand why you bother. It's not like you need the money or anything, so what's the point? Surely at some stage, when you finally do find yourself a man that you can keep hold of, you're just going to leave and have children, so why put yourself through it? Lee smiled. Mainly, I suppose, because I enjoy it, and as for what the future holds, who knows? There are no certainties in life. I suppose not, Patricia agreed, but you really should start thinking about children soon, you know, as you're not getting any younger, and what looks you do have will not last forever. Perhaps Lee feels there is more to life than being a housewife and mother, Patricia, Lucy intersected. Like what? Patricia looked confused. Maybe, Patricia, Lee continued, it all comes down to different people wanting different things. Of course, wanting them and being capable of getting them are 2 completely different things as well. So I think it's a very good idea when a person knows their limitations. In your case, I'm sure you're going to make an excellent trophy wife. Patricia smiled at this, completely unaware that Lee had just insulted her again, which made everybody else smile, all too aware of it. Another drink, Patricia, Lucy offered. No, please, let me. Lee jumped to her feet. You've been on the go all day, and I'd be quite happy to get Patricia her next drink. Lucy and Lee exchanged a knowing look as Lee left the room. This one was going to knock her fucking socks off. Within 2 hours, Patricia had been put to bed, which left the rest of them free to enjoy a very pleasant evening. Billy continued to flirt outrageously with her, but Lee had to admit she was quite enjoying it. He was charming and attentive, but although his manner was very different from his sister's, he was just as false, but in a very non-offensive way. Slowly everybody started to leave, but Patricia and Billy were staying the night. Under normal circumstances, an evening at Lucy's, Lee would have stayed too, but that would have meant Billy sleeping on the sofa, so Lee insisted she would go home to bed, with her living only a short distance away. Undoubtedly by design, Lucy and Jason were tidying the kitchen together, refusing to let either Lee or Billy help. This left the 2 of them in the living room alone together, in front of a roaring fire, which, with the exception of a few candles, was the only lighting in the room. Lucy really did work hard on her presentation. They sat down on the sofa facing each other. I'm sorry my sister is always such a bitch to you, Lee. Billy sounded sincere. Your sister is a bitch to everyone, Billy, because she is a bitch. I don't take it personally. He laughed. You're not wrong, but I do always enjoy watching you put her in her place. Lee smiled. Yeah, I probably should apologise to you about that, because it is a little like shooting fish in a barrel, and I know I should ignore her, but I just can't seem to keep my mouth shut. It's one of my worst faults. Billy leant forward and pushed some hair back behind Lee's ear. I find it hard to believe you have any faults. I can assure you, Billy, I have many. My sister doesn't think so. That's why she always singles you out. She's eaten alive with jealousy over you. But then who can blame her? You are practically perfect in every way. That's me, Mary Poppins, at your service. He brought his face closer to her. I wish you were at my service, he whispered, then kissed her. At first, his kiss was gentle, almost exploratory, to see how Lee would react. But as she responded, he immediately deepened it, his tongue invading her mouth as his arms went around her. Lee had to admit it was fun. Whether it was the kiss, her frame of mind, or simply the alcohol, she didn't care because she was enjoying herself. He pulled his mouth away from hers and moved it to her ear. Have you any idea how much I want to fuck the arse off of you right now? I'm beginning to catch on, she breathed. He kissed her again as his hands ran up and down her back, squeezing her tightly against him. Lee had to concede that Billy was very good at this, but then she could only assume he'd had a lot of practice. He pulled back and looked at her, desire obvious in his eyes. Why don't we just cut the crap, go to bed, and screw each other's brains out all night? Lee half laughed. Well, that's very to the point. You don't think you should play a little harder to get? She teased. He smiled, running his fingers through her hair. You know what I'm about, Lee. I could bullshit you. I'm very good at bullshitting, actually. But we both know you see right through me. So what's the point? And what is it you think I see? I'm a player, babe, and I always will be. I do what or who I want to. I enjoy myself. I don't mean any harm, but I don't mean much else either. Lee laughed. So basically what you're saying is, I shouldn't believe a word you say. He took her hand and placed it on his groin. What you can believe is that I am so hard for you right now, and I can give you pleasure like you've only dreamt of. He attached his lips to her throat. You have no idea how much I would get off on licking you so hard you'll think it's my cock inside you. I want to taste you, then suck you dry. I want to come over every inch of you. I want to make you come so hard again and again that you won't ever want me to stop. He kissed her again, and Lee responded fully, feeling a little hot under the collar herself now, squeezing his erection a little tighter and making him moan into her open mouth. Why shouldn't she do this? He had been completely honest with her about his feelings, or lack thereof, and he had made no secret of the fact that he was only interested in her physically. So what more could she ask for? There wasn't any reason in the world for her to deny herself this pleasure, and probably a million reasons why she should just throw caution to the wind and jump right in. Can I get anyone another Oh, sorry. They both scrambled to an upright position as Lucy entered the room, but not quick enough for her to have missed what was going on. The smirk on Lucy's face was quite clearly proof of that. Lee pretended she hadn't noticed. No, thank you, Lucy. I'm actually leaving now, and Billy is going to walk me home. Aren't you, Billy? Too right I am. Just give me a minute to get our coats. He got up as best he could, trying to adjust himself as he left the room. Lucy raised an eyebrow. Leaving so soon? You must fancy an early night, darling. Or a long one. Take that smug look off your face, will you, please? It's all your fault I'm doing this, getting me all worked up like you did, and making me think of things that I haven't thought about in a very long time. If I cause that boy any permanent physical damage tonight, I'm blaming you, as I'm no longer responsible for my actions. Lucy smiled. I wouldn't worry. I think he can hold his own. Though from what I saw, you were doing a pretty good job of holding them for him. Lee giggled. Not another word, she warned. Every 50 yards or so, Billy would find something to ram Lee up against while he kissed her. A tree, a lamppost, a garden wall. The man was very inventive. During those sessions, he would rub himself up against her and describe in minute detail exactly what he intended to do to her when he got her inside and naked. When he wasn't reciting the Kama Sutra to her, he would walk with his arm around her and talk mainly about himself. It must have been a first for Billy to get a woman using nothing but honesty, because he seemed to be enjoying the no bullshit rule. It was obvious he was his favourite subject and his number one fan. He showed no real interest in having Lee join in the conversation, feeling by now that it was no longer necessary. Whether it was the fresh air sobering Lee up, or the fact that Billy had no real depth to him whatsoever, the closer Lee got to her home, the more she felt like having sex with Billy was perhaps not the best idea in the world after all. It wasn't so much a case of wanting to be wooed, in fact, quite the opposite. But Lee had to be honest with herself and admit that she just didn't fancy him. She was very interested in what he could do to her, and did not doubt his capabilities in the slightest with how he promised to make her feel. She just wasn't interested in the man himself. She stared at him while he spoke, completely in his own world, and while she had to admit he was handsome, and there was nothing wrong with two consenting adults giving each other pleasure, surely there had to be some sort of mutual attraction. It had to be possible that something casual could still create fire in your stomach as well as in your loins that could not be denied. When they reached the bottom of Lee's drive, he started kissing her again. "Billy," she mumbled against his mouth, trying to keep her raging hormones under control, because attraction or not, with Billy's experienced hands travelling all over her, they did make a compelling argument. "Billy, wait." He pulled back and looked down at her, shaking his head. "Don't do this. Don't overthink things and change your mind when it could be so good between us." She laid her head on his chest and let out a deep breath. "I'm sorry." She did genuinely feel guilty at this point because she had definitely led him on. "I just don't think I can do this." "You don't have to be sorry or think, and you don't have to do anything. Just let me do all the work for the pair of us. I promise you, you won't be disappointed." Lee half laughed. "Of that I am certain, but I just don't think it's a very good idea." "So what? Who cares if it's a good idea or not when it feels this good? We have no one to please but ourselves. And trust me when I tell you, I could please you, Lee, over and over again." He ran his hand over her breast, squeezing it tightly before continuing down her stomach to push it between her legs. "You want this as much as I do, and you know it. You are so hot for me right now. I can feel it." Lee was getting ready to explode. She took a deep breath and slowly pushed him away. "No, Billy, I'm just hot, but I'm afraid not for you, and I can't use you like that." "You can if I'm all right with it, and believe me, I am very all right with it." She slowly shook her head. "But I'm not. Let's leave it at maybe a rain check." "If only I thought you meant that." He took her face in his hands. "You know, Lee, at some point in your future, you're going to think back to this very moment and wish you'd made a different choice. You will curse yourself for denying us both such pleasure." Lee smiled. "That will be in about 10 minutes' time, Billy, when I turn off the light and am lying in bed alone. Then I will tell you one more time. Don't do this. Ask me inside." She reached up and kissed him one last time. "Good night, Billy." It was just as Lee had predicted. When she was lying alone in her bed a short while later, her mind could not help but wonder at all the things she could have been doing at that precise moment if she had invited him in. All her good reasons for not sleeping with him didn't seem so good anymore. If only she could have been attracted to him, because it had been so long since she'd had sex. Too long. So why hadn't she invited him in? Well, it was too late now, and no doubt, sooner or later, someone would come along at the right time, right place, and would get her pulses racing and her loins burning. God help him, she thought with a smile. She thought about Billy's kisses and how they had made her feel. Her brain ran away from her, and she wondered how Greg's kisses would feel. As soon as the thought entered her head, her stomach churned. What on earth would make her wonder such a thing? She could certainly do without that kind of craziness creeping up on her. She turned over, punching the pillow, trying to force herself to go to sleep, reminding herself how much she disliked Greg Phillips, no matter how handsome she thought he was.